Let's crack open a beer and share some thoughts.
Welcome to Opinions, and we're back in your ears once again. The beer is in the glass, and we're ready to go, aren't we, Martin?
I've got 3 beers lined up at the moment, but it's all the same beer.
Yeah, and, well, the thing is, the first one that we're going to be featuring this week, it's actually something a little bit different for us because it's a beer that we've made, isn't it?
Yes, we've made. Yes,
I'm sorry, I just can't bring myself to use the word brewed. I've not.
I'm
not
glad you
brewed this
didn't. And throughout the whole of the show, Steve and I will try to avoid saying we have brewed beer because it's patently not true.
No. The ingredients have done the work for us.
Yes.
We just mix them together and we've made beer. So, what have you got in your glass? Because I know we've both made something different, haven't we?
I have got a California Common Lager in my glass,
Excellent.
which is looking rather good, actually. What have you got in yours, though, Steve?
I have got Saisons. It's 4%. And it is also looking really nice. It's got a nice kind of fluffy, almost sort of foamy ice cream type head to it. I'm really happy with how that's come out. Shall we give these a try?
I think so.
And then we can talk about what we're doing here, basically.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers. So how's your lager?
It's nice. Sorry, I said that with a surprised voice, didn't I?
Yeah.
I wasn't sure how this one was going to come out, the lager. Yeah, it's smooth. It's got a slightly creamy mouthfeel. It says it's a bit of a fresh West Coast gem. I mean, it has definitely got some fruity notes. It has got a bit of that sort of malty caramel background that you might get a bit more with the common lager because it's often a little bit darker, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In its colour, I suppose. California would the steam Anchor Steam be the closest?
Anchor Steam beer is kind of the benchmark of the style, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, I think that would be a fair assessment on that one. It's just nice. I mean, and it's got a nice carbonation. It hasn't got an too overt fizziness, but there is definitely just a light carbonation going through it all the way through. Mm-hmm. So initial feelings are, it's good. 4% only as well.
You do seem really surprised, mate.
I am surprised.
Listeners can't see your face right now, but you do look genuinely shocked.
I think it's just because it's the lager aspect of it. Because a lager, if you listen to proper brewers, whether they be home or otherwise, there's no hiding place with a lager, is what I've always heard. Mm-hmm. You have to get it right. There's nothing you can hide behind. So yes, I am a little bit surprised because also, a bit like you've done a little bit of research on this, and I know that some people experiences a bit flat, taste wasn't right. I feel that I've got it where they intended it to be,
and you've managed that in just over a week as well, haven't you? So it's this. I mean, this is no lager that's been sat in a cellar for 90 days, is it?
Yeah, this isn't a Budvar. Let's be clear about this. So it got made. It got made on Saturday afternoon, and then it went in the fridge on Friday morning. So it has actually conditioned for 2 days longer than they specify. So they specify 6 days brewing time and 2 days conditioning. But because I was away for the weekend, it was in the fridge, job done, basically had 4 days sitting in there. Mm-hmm. So I don't know whether I think it's still the way they intended it, but I don't know if it would have been like that if I'd done it yesterday morning, for example, if I tapped it. So, like I said, I suppose the key bit for me is it's nice.
Yeah, and we should probably say at this point, by they, because we've not actually introduced this thing that we're talking about. We've not introduced who they are. So we were sent a Pinter home brewing making beer system, which is from the Greater Good Brewing Co. They very kindly sent us both over a Pinter unit and 2 beers of our choice each. So between us, we've actually made 4 different beers, haven't we?
We have. But I think we should find out what your Saison is like, Steve.
Yes. It's nice. It's no. If it was thinking back to where we spoke about how your benchmark for the style would be Anchor Steam. If I'm going for a straight up Saison benchmark, being Saison DuPont, this is not that. It's quite a way from that. It is very, very light. It's the carbonation on it is lovely. It's actually perfect. It's nice and prickly, like you would want from a Saison, and it is still very, very lively in the glass as well. And again, me holding the glass up to the video is doing nothing for our listeners, but it's got a bit of a lemony hit in there, and very, very, very subtle Belgian-y notes in the background. No real funk going on. No real Saison funk. All in all, it's a very rounded beer. I think I just wanted a bit more from the taste. I maybe wanted a little bit more Belgian-y, a little bit more funk, maybe a little bit of pepper. And none of that's really coming through. However, that doesn't take away from the fact that what I've made is a 4% beer that's exceptionally sessionable.
Yeah, because I mean, Saison DuPont is very easy to drink, but definitely wouldn't be classed as sessionable, would it? I mean, you're right. I mean, if you had turned around and said, yes, I have made a 4% version that is as good as Saison DuPont, I think we probably just would have had to stop the recording anyway, to be honest.
Yeah, I could start putting that shit in bottles and selling it.
Well, exactly. It'd be like Peckham Springs, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
You know, I think probably let's discuss the process. I mean, we both brewed, as you said, one other beer before that. So I did one which was called Stars and Stripes American Pale Ale, and the California Common Lager is called West Nuevo. This was a 4.5% the Stars and Stripes, a hoppy American Dream Pale Ale. And again, it hit the notes that they described. I mean, again, it had very much a soft mouthfeel, creamy. It was obviously a bit more hoppy and fruity than the California Common. But again, it was really nice. I enjoyed it. That lasted over the course of 5 days, doing pours. So literally unit into the fridge, unit back out the fridge, let it settle, and then pour it. So I have to admit, I've used it twice, and both times I've been very satisfied with the outcome.
Maybe not so much. My first brew was Dark Matter, which is an espresso stout, and again that's coming in at 4.4%. Now the problem that I found with that was when I again followed the instructions to the letter with it. They're very easy instructions to use. It's all video based, isn't it? And
yes,
it
and
takes,
basically animation, isn't it?
Yeah, and it takes about, in total, probably about less than 5 minutes to watch through the videos to take you through each stage of the brewing process. So I followed that. The brewing time, the making time was 4 days, and then the conditioning time in the fridge was 3 days, and I stuck to those guidelines for the stout. When it came to tapping it, there's a small dial on the back of the unit that you have to move before you start pouring it to let some of the air out, basically. I maybe did that a little bit fast, and it was very, very lively, and a lot of my stout exploded out of the back of my machine and was everywhere. It was just foaming everywhere out of the back, and that then kind of followed through to pouring it as well, because I was just literally getting pint after pint of foam. So when it eventually did settle and I did manage to get a beer out of it, what I got was a fairly straight up roasted stout that was maybe just a little bit astringent on its bitterness, and maybe too much so for the style. I would have liked a little bit of roasted bitterness, but I didn't get that. It was a bit much. And I think a few people, because some folk were obviously commenting on what we were doing on Twitter, a few people said, "Oh, you should have left this out longer," and you know, because each of the brews comes with 2 lots of times, doesn't it? There's the recommended time that it needs to be sit brewing and conditioning, and then there's an extended time if you want a more rounded beer. So with the stout, I just went for the standard times, but with this 4 saison that I'm drinking, that had a lot longer. So that had 6 days of brewing time, and then it's had 7 days conditioning in the fridge as well. So and it does feel like it's a lot more rounded as a beer than the stout was.
I had none of the same issues you had. So on both of the beers, I haven't had any leakage, so to speak. I would say you do get a lot of foam, especially initially. I think all the beers say they make 10 pints. I did get a lot of pours, but I think I would have struggled with 10 pints. But by and large, instructions are easy to follow. If you want to do no other research and just use their instructions, it works fine. There's stuff on YouTube. I know that one of us, Steve, had a look, joined the Facebook group to get some more top tips.
Mate, that Facebook group is a rabbit hole. It really is. There are people on there that are simply not satisfied with the basic kits that they're sent, and they're doing things like they're like adding brewing sugar to their brews to increase the ABV. There are people on there putting additional flavors in their stouts. It's quite incredible that the length at which some people have gone to on this group, and it's honestly, you can just lose yourself reading some of the things that people are up to with this system. If maybe like you and I, because I know we've spoken about this a lot, you've maybe not got the patience or the time or the will to go through the whole process of brewing a beer from start to finish. What this is a very, very easy and simple system to use. You literally, everything comes in its own pack. There's a video step for every process. You watch the video, you do it yourself, you go through the process of the cleaning process is so easy. You just pour a little tube of purifier into the whole system and let that do its work. That cleans the system for you. And literally from start to finish, when you get your fresh pack through the door, to having your beer in the position where it's going through its brewing process, probably takes about 20 minutes.
Unless,
yeah, there is an issue, isn't there?
Yes, there is. So it's basically a 2-part machine. You've got essentially like a big flask which holds the beer both in the brewing and conditioning process. Feels like maybe it has some sort of vacuum as well, because even when you've had it out for a few hours, it stays pretty cool. But it has a brewing dock, and again, I haven't looked into what the brewing dock does, but you need this for the brewing time. It has to be connected. It can be a pig to connect. It can be really awkward to connect, even though it looks simple, and obviously on the animation it looks simple. And I did get it done, but this second beer was very close to not happening.
Yeah, I struggled with that as well. And I think because you do that twice, don't you? You connect that bit twice. Once when you're cleaning, and it seems to connect fine when you're cleaning. But then when you've put your water in and you've added your yeast and you've added your fresh pack of beer extract, trying to then get that brewing dock back on is almost impossible, and I don't know why. I think it's potentially because of the added volume of liquid that's in the base part. But again, using that Facebook group as reference, it's a common problem, and there are a lot of people saying, well, you should do it the other way round. So you actually put the brew dock on the floor and then you plug your system in on top because you've got the added weight. But the Greater Good actually say no, don't do that because it's too much pressure on the brew dock. There's suggestions around using some cooking grade silicone or some vegetable oil just on the connector, just to help it slide into place easier. But yeah, I mean, the second time I made a beer for the Saison was a real pig to get that brewing dock on.
Yeah, it was worse the second time for me as well. Eventually, I had to take it out into the back garden and literally put my body weight on it nearly.
Yeah, you shouldn't have to do that.
No. So for me, there is a design flaw there. And the only other thing I would say is you need space. Not so much during the brewing time because it stands vertical, but the conditioning time is in the fridge. So any listeners who saw the pictures we've posted, it takes up a pretty good chunk of your fridge. And if that's a family fridge, then you're probably losing that bit where the fruit and veg goes. It's not something I would do all the time. Like I said, part of it is the space. If I had something coming up where people were coming over, I might think, well, yeah, it's ain't different. You know, for the first couple of hours that people are here, rather than having to worry about, you know, just have some glasses out and that maybe outside on a table, I can switch off from certain activities. Like when we've had outdoor stuff at Clayton's and someone's brought a keg along, and then you don't have to think about it for a while.
Well, that's you and I rocking up to the next Clayfest with a pinter under our arm. Then we can pretend like we're home brewers. We make beer.
Max and James will be so impressed, and Simon too.
I'm sure they will. Just, I suppose, one final question about it is its retail price is currently £85, and for that you get the unit, the brewing dock, and you get your first two fresh presses as well. Having now used the system twice, weighing up all of the pros and cons, do you think that's value for money? Would you have, you know, we were fortunate to be sent that. Would you have gone, I'm going to spend £85 on a home beer making system?
I had seen it last year, and so my curiosity was piqued. I know that one of my brothers contacted me about it, and also my mate Carl, who listens to the show. I think all things considered, even with what I consider to be the design flaw with the brewing dock and the space you require, I think it is value for money. And the two beers I've had have been nice. I haven't thrown away the beer because I didn't like the beer. It was just that after 5 days, I didn't need any more of the same beer, and I think it was starting to turn. What do you think on the price?
I think it's good. Like you say, apart from the flaws that we've spoken about, I do think it's a little bit flimsy. I think parts of it can feel and look a little bit cheap as well. I mean, my one in particular, one of the little rubber feet has fallen off. The chamber's a little bit buckled as well. I seem to have a bit of a problem with my tap handle, that the beer doesn't come out that fast. It kind of trickles out rather than pours out.
Yeah, mine comes out fast when it feels like there's still pressure in there, as in you've got to get a foamy head, and then it does go to a trickle. So again, maybe that is just something that they haven't quite ironed out yet. There isn't like an adjustment you can make to the tap handle, is there? It's on or it's off.
There's the adjustment on the back, isn't there, where you can have it's either off or it's on carbonated, and you're supposed to essentially. I think one of the best explanations of that was, again, on the Facebook group. Someone said it's basically like if you've got a bottle of fizzy drink, the more times you open it, the flatter it's going to get.
Yeah, makes sense.
So that's essentially what that is. But no, I mean, I can see myself using it. It's been an interesting experiment. And like I say, I'm not going to say for a minute that you and I have brewed beer.
No.
We have successfully managed to put ingredients together into a sealed unit that has then made beer for us.
Yeah, and this is two guys, well, certainly for me, I hate following instructions when I'm putting anything together. So this was wonderfully well presented in terms of the animation and the steps, and every now and again the warning saying, are you sure you've done so and so? So
yeah, I like that bit. It does double check you every step of those videos to say, have you done this?
Yeah, so there's no getting past it. Yeah, it was an interesting experiment. I've got beer that will last me now for a few days, which is great because I actually wanted a couple of dry days. So I don't know how I'm going to master this one.
So same here, actually, mate. So
maybe the experiment will be that how does it last until the weekend now?
Yeah, and see if it does. I mean, again, their guidelines suggest that once you've tapped it, you've got 7 days of decent beer.
Okay, well, that's the follow up for us. I mean, if anyone listening does get, I mean, if anyone listening does want to try and wants to ask us a bit more about our experiences, please do. But if anyone does give it a go, then we do want to hear how you get on.
Oh yeah, I'd love to hear about people's experiences of using this. Well, what we'll do is in the show notes we'll put a link to where you can find out all about it and where you can buy one if you're interested. I'll also put a link to the Facebook group because if you are going to invest in one of these, it is worth having a little read through, joining that group and having a read through some people's experiences, because I certainly found very quickly, particularly with some of the issues that I've had, that I wasn't alone in having those issues, that other people were having them as well. And it's a really great little community. Everybody's really positive and everybody just provides a lot of help and assistance. Well, while we're continuing to enjoy our homemade beers, let's triumphantly celebrate the return properly this show of Beery Adventures, mate.
I know it's been a little while coming, but we've got a few to go. But we've got a few shout outs first, haven't we, Steve?
We have. So obviously we are currently now transitioning back to being able to go out to places and enjoy visiting places again. But there are still a few online events going on. And I think we've said a few times in the past that we feel as though this is how things may go now, especially with sort of new beer launches that breweries want to do. I know you've said on a number of occasions that it's a cost-effective way for breweries to bring people together from all over the country and not have to pay out for a venue, travel expenses, all those sorts of things. So there's still a few of those going on, aren't there?
Yeah, and I do think that some of these will continue. I mean, the first one we've got on here, Neptune's 6th birthday bash, which they very kindly invited us both to. But what I did notice, that obviously they had the launch one, and they had the beer they'd done with Lost and Grounded, Lost at Sea. But also, I think the week after, they actually did one for people who just buy the beers, literally for punters.
And they had a birthday box, didn't they? And that gave you access to a public online birthday party, wasn't it?
Yeah, which I thought was a really nice thing to do and a really good way of engaging, again, directly with their customers. Ultimately, the punters are more important than you and I and our peers, Steve. So they're the ones who spend the hard-earned cash. We most of the breweries we get involved with, we end up buying the beers. But the regular punters, week in, week out, month after month, who buy the beers, they're the ones who are important to the breweries. So to start engaging with them in different ways, I think works really well. And it was again, spending a bit of time virtual as it is with Julie and Les was excellent. Really, it was a very fun evening.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. And we also got to attend an evening with Budvar as well, who were introducing their new brand ambassador. And they did that through, again, the medium of Zoom. But we had 3 beers that were sent over to us. So the Budvar Original, Budvar Dark, and the Budvar Reserve. But then they also sent some cheese as well to go with the beers. So it became like a beer and cheese pairing. And there was also an instruction on how to do some marinated cheese. Now, I didn't do that because obviously not really my thing. Did you do that?
You've just reminded me. It's in the fridge. I did do it because I had to get the time again. I had to get the timing right to coincide with me coming back from my weekend away. I've got cheese to eat later. Yes,
excellent. You'll have to let us know how that tasted.
Yeah, but no. Again, it was a fun evening. It felt that one. I felt they were really conscious of the time. We did 3 beers and then the 3 beers paired with cheese, and it was fairly much kept to the 1 hour.
Yes,
so it was quick, and 2 of those bottles were 500s.
It felt a little rushed at points, But yeah, I guess you didn't have to drink all of the beer in one go, did you? But no, again, and that's probably one of the events that I've been to where there was also a lot of people on that, weren't there? There was sort of upwards of 40 people on that one.
But again, you can have 40 people. You haven't got to find a room which holds 40 people. You just need to find a Zoom connection.
Yeah.
So again, it works really well. And, good luck to Radic in his role as brand ambassador. And as ever, I enjoyed the Budvar beers.
Yeah, always enjoyable that they are. And then the other online event was probably the biggest one.
Obviously.
Of course, was our very own Opinions and Friends Summer Sesh, which was kind of in a way was us maybe saying goodbye to doing things online as things begin to transition back to some sort of normality.
Yeah, although I would add the caveat there, for the reasons of COVID, maybe we're saying goodbye, fingers crossed, but noting my earlier comments about breweries maintaining an online presence through this medium of using Zoom to connect with people, we will never manage to connect with everyone who listens to the show, who gets involved on Twitter, regardless of where we pick as a venue for, the Summer Sesh, what was the Crimbo Crawl, because it's not going to be convenient for everyone. So I wouldn't say it's definitely gone, but we may not try to do it over 3 days ever again.
Never say never, mate. I think it was a challenge for you and I, certainly to go the course on the 3 days. But really, really grateful to those friends of ours that joined us and ran sessions. So thanks to Luke and Andrew, who did the Friday night live with Rhythm and Brews, which was even more fun than I had expected it was going to be.
It was great.
Yeah, so some of the ways that some of the music choices went, Luke just randomly jamming on his guitar in the middle of a song. That was a great evening, and certainly set us up for what was to come as well. On the Saturday, we obviously started off with the and again, I was quite surprised. We had a virtual tour of Brew York with Lee,
but didn't it work well? Because it was his friend at the brewery walking around with the laptop following him.
Yeah, it was. I've got to say, it's one of the best brewery tours I've ever been on, and I wasn't actually there.
Yeah, well, I think there's probably 2 reasons for that. One is I think Lee's personality and passion for the brewery really came across. But it's a brewery tour where you could drink constantly through the tour.
Yes. Normally you're having to wait until you get to the end, aren't you?
Yeah. Sometimes they might give you a little a drink before you start so that you're not dying at first by the time you get to the end of it. But a lot of the times, for very good reasons, you can't walk around with glass at a brewery site with all that equipment going on. So, yes, I think there was that as well. But it was really well done. And then the Q&A, I think we did do the full 2 hours with Lee at Brew York.
Yeah. And I have to say, and I think I said this during the session, that I am still struggling, still now, a couple of weeks on, to understand why we haven't had Lee on the show yet. And I know he listens. So Lee, we are going to have you on at some point, because we had so much fun with you that afternoon. It was great that you joined us on the Saturday evening as well. But I think there's a lot more of our listeners that would really enjoy listening to what you've got to say about pretty much everything.
And like you say, the Saturday night he joined us. And, again, thanks to all the listeners who joined us on the Saturday evening. And then we got into Sunday, and we start off with the most chilled.
Oh, that was beautiful. That Sunday afternoon, wasn't it?
Rob doing his social distancing sounds live a couple of times, putting the vinyl on track 2 instead of track 1, and then maybe the odd expletive coming out. But just some of the tunes he chose, lovely eclectic mix, the interaction with people on the calls as well. That was just that hour and 45 flew by.
Yeah. I think there was a lot of people saying on the chat as well that we need to make this a regular thing. But yeah, it was so chilled. It was exactly what I hoped it would be for that Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
And it was great to see it as well as a contrast to the Friday night, where we kept the conversation going with the music in the background. That on the Sunday, the music very much took the forefront, and people had their mute on. You could just see people bopping away, their heads bopping away, and just like really enjoying the music. And yeah, it just all came together so well.
Yeah, no, it was excellent. So, Rob, we love you, man. That was brilliant.
Yeah, cheers, Rob. And then just we finished the weekend with just a few chilled beers in the evening, which, yeah, it was. It ended up being a very long weekend.
It was, and obviously thanks to Paul at Two Brews for curating the box for the Saturday evening session so that people could join in with us as well.
I do just want to thank everybody that joined us for session, everyone that got involved. We had a great time. It was a really good weekend of just enjoying drinking with people online.
It was just enormous fun. I'm quite happy to have a break from doing that with listeners and hoping to bump into people. But if that was the big hurrah, it's a good one to remember.
Of course, yeah, for sure.
To again extol the virtues of this online beer world that we've discovered via the medium of Zoom, Clayton and I facilitated another virtual beer tasting at work, which I think is our fifth one now, hosted by the Rambling Beer Man, Joe Llewellyn-Jones, and beer sommelier Sarah Hyde. But we actually included our Dutch and Belgian colleagues as well. So there's a few people who've always followed us, our interaction on the work intranet site, and we found a way that with Joe and the bottle shop in Amsterdam, we could get the same beers to both the UK and the EU without trying to go through the whole extortionate process of going from the UK to the EU now. So we managed to get it done, a little bit different in costs. We had 4 beers each. The third beer was a different beer, but all of us finished off on a big beer. So we finished off on Fierce Beer, Very Big Moose, and the EU colleagues finished off on Oscar Blues 10 Fiddy. So we all finished off on some good numbers there. So excellent night, really good fun. And it just did, again, show that we can do a lot of sharing via this medium. However, getting out of the house has been fucking brilliant. Not only getting out of the house, being allowed to go into somewhere else at the same time afterwards as well.
Yeah, that's been the best bit is being able to go back inside again, because I have got to say, as much as I've enjoyed going back to pubs and bars, I am fucked off with sitting in the cold outside.
Yes.
I've had enough of that shit to last me a lifetime.
So go on. I know that your first adventure out in a pub was before my one. So, Steve, where did you go first?
Well, I went to the Vic, obviously. They opened back up the Wednesday of the week where you were able to go inside. I couldn't go on the Wednesday night, but I went down on the Thursday evening for a couple of hours, and it was just so nice to be back inside. Yes, table service still exists. You have to check in, that sort of thing. You've got to wear a mask when you're walking about, but these are small prices to pay for being able to sit at a table and drink a pint of their Colchester Brewery Ambassador served through a sparkler in 3 goes, because it was just tasting so delicious.
And presumably you moved away from the cast, didn't you, Steve?
I did, because they had Colonel on. So there were pints of Colonel. They also had they had 5 Points Railway Porter on keg as well. So I had one of those, and I think as we were heading to the Vic, I said to Em, we had a 2-hour booking, and I said to him, "This is a 5-pint session," and she was like, "What?" I was like, "No, it's 5 pints in 2 hours," and it was. So I started off with 2 pints of cask, and then I think they had Hamilton N1, Colonel Mosaic IPA, and then 5 Points Railway Porter to finish. I was a very, very happy man when I left the Vic, I have to say.
Isn't it nice what you said there at the start? These were small things you have to do. then why the fuck there's so many? Why is there is a sizable minority of people who want to try and avoid doing those things?
Oh, I don't know. I'm getting more and more frustrated with people that are like, "Oh, I'm not going back to a pub until I can stand at the bar," and it's like, fine. I'm quite happy for you to never come to the pubs that I drink in if that's your attitude, because you're part of the problem for a lot of people.
Yeah, maybe we'll get to that, because when I went to Plymouth this weekend to go and see my son at university. I could have waited till he came home in a couple of months, but it was a good reason to get down there, and I haven't seen him for 6 months. But on the way to Plymouth, I decided to meet up with an ex-colleague, a good friend of mine, at a pub near Monument, because it's on the way to Paddington. So I went to Fuller's, the Hydrant. So we met up there, and I'd already he'd already booked a table, all nicely set out. The Hydrant always has a fairly decent selection of drinks outside of the Fuller's range. On cask, they had Pride and Hophead, but they had a fairly decent range of keg beers, and I think they've upgraded their fridge selection as well. But however, I saw Colonel, so I bypassed everything, went for Colonel.
Straight for it, yeah.
Yeah, Pale Ale, Stitcher, Equinox on tap, really nice. Although, and I sent you the picture, Steve, it looked really murky. And I was going, oh, this is, because I never bother checking. It's Colonel, I'll just go for it.
Yeah.
The hazy bit, I expect that with a Colonel a lot of the time, especially on draft. But it still unmistakably tasted and smelled like a Colonel beer. You know, that earthiness, that earthy quality to it. Didn't have the thickness of a murky beer, but it didn't half look it. I have to admit, there was a little period of time where it sat in front of me and I was going, what if I don't like it? Oh,
how can you even ask yourself that question?
Well, they have put Sabro in a beer once.
I think a couple of times now, haven't they? Put it in a dark beer as well now.
Oh, they?
Yeah.
No, I didn't know that. But yeah, I did. I was a bit nervous, but it was fine. Good enough. I had another 2. And then I had a Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. However, my colleague only had 2 beers. So we had 6 beers in total. And it was £50.
That's pricey.
It is pricey.
But you were in the centre of London as well.
Yeah, and Fuller's pubs, I do know this bit because I've got 2 Fuller's pubs near work. Fuller's pubs are very expensive. You may recall a couple of times after we've done the recording, Steve, you can take a bit of hit on your card if there's 3 or 4 of you in there. But I also got a service charge, which I hadn't noticed at the time because I was keen to get my tube. And that was 12.5% on top of everything else I paid as well. And given the beers were £7.50 for the Colonel and £7 for the Sierra Nevada, I was a bit surprised given that I hadn't ordered any food and I can't go to the bar.
Yeah, that feels a bit cheeky.
So,
because they have to provide table service at the moment.
Yes,
that's not an option.
It's not about not tipping or anything like that. It's just that I haven't got a choice at that particular moment in time. So if they want me to have beer, they need to serve me. And on the receipt, it does say a service charge will be added if you're having food. But I didn't have food. So I was a little bit disappointed with that because at the price of those beers, you wouldn't necessarily expect them to add anything on. Yes, I'm in the square mile. Yes, I'm in the city. Yes, people are well off. But I know that I can go to the Pelt Trader 5 minutes away and I can get Colonel under £6. So a couple of rounds, you've almost had a free pint in comparison to the Fullers.
Yeah.
But it was nice to be in the pub and it was nice to be sitting there at the table, not outside where it was raining or cold and enjoying my drink. But the cost did catch me out and the service charge put me out a little bit as well.
I mean, I know we've heard and certainly online people are saying that obviously the cost of drinking is going to go up, and you've got to expect that. You know, breweries have had the toughest year ever, and you would expect them to put a slight increase on the price of their beer. As that goes through the distribution system, everyone's putting their little bit on as well to continue to make a profit. And I've no issue with paying a little bit more for my beer at the moment because I'm, particularly maybe with cask, maybe we're getting closer to the true value of what we should be paying for cask rather than expecting it to be cheap. but it's prices are creeping up, and I think we have to be careful because it could be very easy. It could very quickly get to a point where some people are like, well, you've actually priced me out of the market there. I'm going back to drinking at home.
Yes, and that would be my concern as well. Now, like I said, just for the balance, that's what I said about the Pelt Trader, which is only 5 minutes away. Brewdog isn't that much further away, and Brewdog's not as expensive either. But Fuller's, and I think probably, especially since maybe they've split between the brewing and being a pub co, and I think I've seen a bit more of an increase. But it can't be travel because Colonel is like 2 miles away from where I was drinking it.
Yeah, and I suppose the flip side of that is the drinks that we had in the Vic. So I had 5 pints, Em had 3 pints, we had 8 pints, and it was only just over 40 quid. So that obviously rounded out at just over £5 a pint.
Yeah, and again, I'm the same as you. I'm expecting some uplift, but I do think certain places just need to be careful because for a long time, people have got used to having quality at home.
Yeah.
And that doesn't just apply to our world, macro quality as well. If people have got used to buying a pack of a 6-pack, a pack of 12, or even a slab of 24, then suddenly you go back and you're spending 6-7 quid on a pint of Peroni or something. You could still put those people off as well. And they're the people who make up a big percentage of the market.
Yeah, and there's never been so much choice available online, either as there, and that's still there now. That's a legacy of what we've been through in this last year, is that there is now more availability to buy direct from breweries and direct from bottle shops online. And if pubs do start pushing that too far, it's not a huge leap. I would have thought to people suddenly going, well, those 4, 5, 6 visits to the pub a month, maybe they're only 2 visits, and I'm going to spend the other time drinking at home.
Yeah, I agreed. I mean, again, there was a few people who, seemed a bit surprised about having to check in and wearing the mask once they were moving around. Not really sure why, because I'm not sure that much has changed in that respect from the pre-lockdown situation we had when we were indoors. So the acting done bit is just starting to grate. Oh, do we? Oh, why? And it's like, fuck's sake, just do it.
Yeah, because nothing's changed. That's why.
Do you think they want to be doing this at the door every time someone comes in? It's just it was grating on me, I have to admit. But I did get to Plymouth eventually. My Meta Power for travel delays worked well on the tube and the train, so I was an hour and a half late getting into Plymouth. But enjoyed a couple of pints of tribute at the pub near where me and Michael had some very nice dinner. And then on the Saturday, popped over to see Sam at Vessel Beer Shop. So he hasn't gone back to doing indoors because he wants the indoors just to be for the bottle shop space at the moment. But he's got some space outdoors. Again, we were lucky with the weather on Saturday. That wouldn't have worked on the Sunday because Sunday in Plymouth, it just tipped it down literally all day. But we got a nice little spot, and I started off with Braybrook Kells, which I think he is almost having as his house lager, at least for the summer. And a couple of pints of that went down so well, 4.2% in the sunshine. Perfect. It's such a good beer. It's got all the qualities you want in the hills. They are really nailing it, I'd have to say, from Braybrook. And then followed up with the Duration, one of the West Coast Dipper, gracefully face down, an 8% double IPA. So I had 2 halves of that as well. Very nice. Definitely hit the star boxes for the West Coast. And I think I don't know if Duration have done a Dipper before. Can't recall them doing it.
I think a couple of times they have, yeah.
Oh, okay. But yeah, really nice. And again, just another Westie that's available out there again. So yeah, that was, and then I popped off to a fish bar, which had paired up with Salcombe Brewery on the outside terrace. So you could have your fish and chips, and you had a choice of taps as well, which was quite a nice idea. And then I think Michael got a bit fed up with the beery side of our journey. I had warned him. He gave me no other options. So I said, well, I got recommended to go to Rome Brewery. And do you have to Rome to get there? I mean, Plymouth's got too many hills for starters. And it's all uphill from the centre. So by the time I got there, I was ready to have their hills when I got there as well. and then had their stout. And then beery wise, I was pretty much done that day. I think I finished off Saturday with a glass of red wine and an espresso martini, as it turned out, because the weather had cleared beautifully compared to the rest of the weekend. And I just sat down overlooking the harbour. Very nice it was too. So that was my Saturday. And while I sip some more beer, I'm going to let you chat for a bit, Steve, because you did have a very good beery adventure, didn't you?
Yes, mate, because while you were down sunning yourself on the south coast, I had headed slightly north in what's possibly one of the quickest turnarounds to us having a guest on the show and us saying we must visit. I went to Round Corner in Melton Mowbray following Combi being on the last show.
That's a 12-day turnaround, Steve.
I know. I just really wanted to go, and we had a spare weekend. Emma's birthday's coming up, so I took her for a treat to Round Corner. Not sure who it was more of a treat for, whether it was for her or me, but we certainly had a great day there. It was nice to meet Combi in person. Also met Dan, who was their bar manager and trainee brewer, and just like a really friendly crowd. Combi showed us around the brewery. We got to have a look around the livestock market and the site, and everything you spoke about in the last show, it's all there. We got to see it all, and then just really enjoyed drinking their beers in their tap room, and drank far too much black lager. Their gunmetal black lager is absolutely stunning. It's just so drinkable. And there's also an imperial version of it that's barrel aged that we were drinking pints of. It's like 7.5%, and we were drinking pints of imperial black lager at 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. But yeah, just a really great little day out. It was it was nice to visit a brewery and sit in a tap room and just have that whole experience again.
And did you try any pork pies or cheese?
We bought some cheese. We got there a little bit earlier and we headed into town because there's a couple of cheesemongers in. Are they cheesemongers? Is that a thing, or I just made that up? I know, cheese shops. So we went into one called the Melt and Cheese Board. And the woman in there was so helpful. We kind of were saying what we wanted and what they had. So we picked up a few cheeses, and our intention was to, as the evening sort of drew in and it got a bit colder, we were going to take away some beer from the tap room. We were going to go back to the hotel and we were going to have some cheese and beer. However, the aforementioned 7.5% imperial black barrel aged lagers put pay to that, so we didn't actually get round to having the cheese while we were there, but we did have it over the weekend and anyway, and there were some delightful cheeses there, a nice little selection, including some local ones as well.
Excellent. So well worth the visit to Round Corner?
Absolutely, yeah. If you are visiting, there's Melton doesn't really have a lot else to offer. Drinks wise, a lot of sort of very traditional pubs with very standard taps. So you are going purely for Round Corner. But if you're staying over, the Premier Inn is quite literally overlooks the brewery. So it's a 2-minute walk to the brewery. So
well,
nice and easy to get to.
2-minute walk on the way there, and about 10 minutes after all that imperial lager.
Yes, yeah. But that was great. I had a really good time, and then on Sunday we had to get back to Colchester because we were meeting some friends in town to drink more alcohol. And yeah, we went into Colchester and went to Three Wise Monkeys, which is becoming a bit of a standard visit for us now, because they also seem to have a lot of Kernel on, and they had the half brick, which is a red rye ale.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
nice.
I had 2 pints of that, slipped down very, very easy. And then after that, we went to a new micropub that's opened up in Colchester called The Magnet, which is in what used to be a pub between the station and the Vic, basically. I think it was the Norfolk Arms, was it?
King pub.
Yeah, basically they've split the pub in two, and they've now got a micro pub, and the other side is going to be what they're calling it a high-end fish and chip restaurant. So we visited the Magnet, and yeah, it was looked very new, smelt very new. Obviously, it's they've just finished the decorating in there. A couple of hand pumps of cask beers from Colchester Brewery. Quite the range of Colchester Brewery bottles as well, and what bottles also from St Boltoffs, which I think is a local brewery that specialise in Belgian style beers in the Colchester area, and then they had a few keg taps as well, which was a nice contrast. And I've never. It's the first micro pub I've been in where I've seen keg offering as well. Normally it's just the cask offering, but we had a few beers in there as well, and we had a thoroughly good time. So quite the beery weekend for us this past one was.
Oh yeah, I mean I finished off with the Sunday going out for a spot lunch with Michael. And went to a pub where I stayed at back in December and had a couple of nice pints of Dartmoor Brewery beer, the JL Ale and the Dartmoor IPA. Both very nice. Some excellent food. But once again, I was disappointed by how people were acting. When I say acting, I don't think they were doing anything wrong. So there was a table of 5, and then another couple who were already at another table just came and joined them. So that made a table of 7. Which I'm pretty certain is above the rule of 6. And then when the landlady challenged them, but she only challenged them about the checking in, they said, "Oh, why?" So, I was like, really? I mean, they haven't been challenged on the fact that they've got 7 there now. So I just think because they were locals and they're literally on the River Tamar, so you're not really getting passing traffic. They obviously felt fairly confident. But it was disappointing. I'm not saying they're all going to suddenly get fucking COVID, but why can't people just stick to the rules for a little while longer?
Yeah, and I think some of these rules will be here to stay, and it's just going to be, how life is now. I think certainly things like I think we're going to see more mask wearing in public, and I think people need to get used to that. I mean, I have to say, our experiences over the weekend seemed to be that people were generally behaving themselves and were following the rules, following the guidelines. We didn't see any instances of anybody not doing that. That was for sure. But yeah, I mean, you just have to take a cursory look at Twitter to see that there are landlords and bar staff that are getting very frustrated with the great British public that don't seem to be able to follow a simple set of guidelines.
And to be fair, on this occasion, it tends to be a fairly simple set of guidelines. Yeah,
you've got to check in when you get to a venue. You've got to keep your mask on until you've sat down, and you don't have more than 6 people at the table. It's as simple as that, isn't it?
Yeah, and you put your mask on. We went to a sports bar afterwards, and there was a guy watching the football who decided he didn't need to wear a mask when he was walking around because he was then going to wear his partner's lanyard, which was an exemption.
Oh, okay.
I don't think it's interchangeable.
No, it's no.
I don't think your exemption's interchangeable. It was just frustrating. So it's not about having a moan fest, and it's these things will ease. Like you say, I don't know if everyone's going to go, but I just think there are going to be other people who will be impacted by people being selfish, whether that be someone being nervous about it or being paranoid about it or being anxious about it, because people are just thinking of themselves. And that's all we're talking about. This is just selfish. That's it. There isn't anything else that you can describe it as. So it was disappointing. So although I went back there because I had a really nice experience back in December, I won't return. So yeah. Simple as that.
It only takes one experience, doesn't it, for you to not go back again?
Yeah, and these are things which I will remember, because there are some places which are being brilliant and the clientele who go there are being very good. It's when people feel they're exempt for whatever reason, it's just peeing me off.
Well, just one more beery adventure from me, and that is once again the return of Hopinions on Wheels. because I just want to say thank you to people who donated some money towards my fundraiser. I did complete 101 miles over that weekend, broken up over the space of 3 rides. Each of the rides perfectly accompanied by pouring rain as well. But we got through it. Colin and I got through the mileage. We did it, and like I say, raised the total of £616. So thanks to everybody that donated to that. Really am very, very grateful. And I celebrated finishing that ride by enjoying Dropped Limb from Duration and Verdant, which is the saison that they made, that they fermented in a cool ship with lumps of logs in it that they had cut down from the farm to add stuff to it, and it was nice. It was earthy, it was dusty, and there was a subtle funk going on in it, but it seemed like the perfect beer to celebrate my achievement with.
Well, I mean, well done. You did have some pretty horrendous weather for the second 2 rides, so I think you did well to get that early heads up on the Friday when you got a bit ahead of yourself as well. So I think that probably stood you in quite good stead. But no, it was a good effort, Steve. And I think that, again, if we think back to this time last year, I don't think you would have seen yourself doing that.
Not in the space of 3 days, no.
So, really, really well done. And, everyone who sponsored you and got involved as well.
Yeah. Oh, cheers for that. And cheers to everyone that did donate some pennies. That was a hell of a roundup of beery adventures. What wasn't it? I mean, I've only got probably a couple of mouthfuls of my 4 saisons left to go, and this is actually the second pour. We've sneaked in a cheeky second pour of the beers while I've been chatting there. So let's get through the news, and then we'll take some last thoughts on this beer before we get into our next beer. So first up is the news that 6 Degrees North, based in Scotland, are basically downsizing. So this announcement was posted up on Twitter. It was a very heartfelt piece that they put up, and basically they said that COVID has brought huge challenges in the sector, financial instability and emotional and organizational stress. So it's forced them to reflect on what's really important to them, and as a result they've basically decided to shut 2 of their bars in Edinburgh and Glasgow, and just scale things back a little bit just to focus on where they're based in the northeast of Scotland. So focusing on brewing the beer, their new canned range that they've got, and just to scale the business back to ensure that the business survives going forward, which seems to be a very sensible move.
Yeah, I mean, it's better to do it now than do it when you have to do it, as in at the right end of it, and it probably won't make any difference. But I mean, I think it's probably worth mentioning now that, we are going to be discussing this in a bit more detail next time, aren't we, Steve?
We are, because we will be joined by Robert Lindsay, who is the managing director owner of 6 Degrees North, and we'll be chatting to him about their decision to downscale in a bit more detail then. Next up on the news, there's a lot about micropubs in this week's show. It's almost like it's a bit of a theme. Is that there's a film is about to be launched, all based on micropubs. Basically, a group of people have got together to look at the growing phenomenon of micropubs, and it's called Micropubs the New Local, and at the moment it's due to launch on the 12th of June. There is a premiere evening where you can buy tickets to go along to. I think they're going to do a bit of a question and answer with the people that were involved in the making of the film, and then they're going to premiere the film as well. So what we'll do, if you are interested in that, and maybe ways in which you can get hold of the film after it's premiered, we'll put a link in the show notes and you can have a look at that if that's your sort of thing. And then finally for the news is again more I suppose pandemic related news, and that's the news that 6 pubs are being demolished or converted each week during this last year or so. Now, this was something that you came across today, wasn't it?
Yeah, just I got spotted in the Morning Advertiser, and I think we had didn't we have a period pre-COVID where the rate of pub closures had slowed to its lowest level for a number of years, but yeah, pubs lost during the pandemic, they're saying, is 384 in total. And, they've got a bit of a split as well. So the Southeast, they're saying 62 pubs have gone, Southwest 30, Yorkshire 27, East 44, London, I say only 23. But London seems to have less pubs than a lot of the other areas, but then some areas do cover quite a wide areas, like Yorkshire and stuff like that is a big area. But I think it just adds up, doesn't it? I mean, I know that some places have opened, and we obviously still get tap rooms opening, and even the micropub you referenced as well, Steve. But almost 400 pubs, sadly, have gone in the space of 15 months. Some of those may have been shit, let's be honest. But it's bound to, even a shit pub is usually someone's favourite.
Yeah, and I suppose if you look at obviously the 6 Degrees North decision, they possibly saw what was going to happen if they carried on trying to spread themselves too thin. So that they decided that rather than see those venues close, they've actually handed them over to new tenants, essentially, that will the bars will still stay open, albeit not under the 6 Degrees North banner.
Yeah, so like I said, we'll get to talk to him more about it, get to speak to Robert, but hopefully it's a decision which secures the long-term future of 6 Degrees North.
And hopefully one and similar decisions like that will stop this surge of pubs closing, because we don't want that, do we? We don't want, because once we've lost these places, we've lost them. Very, very rarely do they come back. Yeah,
there's very rarely a resurrection. So it's sad news, and hopefully anyone who was impacted by it has managed to find something else as well. But it's a large number, so you can see, and that just illustrates the problems that this industry has had now over the last 15 to 16 months.
So keep supporting your locals, folks. It's as simple as that. Otherwise, you will lose them.
Use them or lose them, as they say.
Yeah. Final thoughts then on our homemade beers. I know I've certainly had a couple of my 4 Saisons. It's relatively easy to drink. It's enjoyable. It's not going to win any awards, but it is a tasty beer.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say the same about mine. I've been supping away, not really having to think about it, but I've been enjoying it. I know I've been enjoying it. I haven't put it down to stop it. I've carried on going back for more sups. I am basically down to the end of it now. I have put the rest of it back in the fridge, and we'll see how that is in 4 or 5 days' time from the night of recording. Yeah, it was an interesting experiment. As I said to you, Steve, when you asked me about it, I said, I am curious. My curiosity has been satisfied, and I haven't been left disappointed.
No, I haven't, and I think I will probably continue to use it as well. How regular is another thing, but it's certainly something that I'll continue looking to explore. Moving on to our second beer of the evening. So this is Otherworld. It's a extra special bitter, and it's a collab between Yeastie Boys and Utopian.
Yeah, no, I think we may have referenced this a little while back when they did the launch for this as one of the Utopian evenings. And I certainly enjoyed it then. And I heard a rumour that John Keeling said it was the second best ESB, but I also heard a rumour that he said that about a number of other ESBs over the last 18 months. So who knows what may be the first one, answers on a postcard. But I really, really did enjoy this the first time round I had it. So it's sitting in the glass. It's looking at me. Shall we dive in?
Cheers.
Cheers. It's got a really malty, earthy quality to it, hasn't it?
Yeah. Bit of sweetness. Maybe a little bit of some hints of marmalade going on in there as well.
Is very similar to the notes you get off of Fuller's beer from their yeast as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is very, very close to Fuller's ESB, this one.
Yeah. This almost feels like it's got slightly more earthy, malty quality to it to the first time round I had it.
Yeah, I think it's. I'm not sure whether they've done a second run of it or whether it's the same one from the original batch that's just got a little bit more age on it.
Yeah.
But I think I know when we attended the online launch that this was part of, there are a few people saying that it was suffering from can shock, which I'm still not sure is a thing or not, but apparently it is.
That came up because I actually challenged Sarah on that on the virtual beer tastings that got mentioned, and she did note that a lot of the time, especially for these smaller releases and small batch releases, that you would be getting your cans from a bottle shop more often than not, and so there is a period of time where it's been waiting and settling.
Yeah, good point. Yeah,
and I have to admit that I hadn't considered that, because prior to that conversation, I was thinking that can shop thing's a load of bollocks. So
I'm glad it wasn't just me.
I know. I was like
that.
I was becoming one of those phrases which it just seemed to be a catch-all for anything, which wasn't quite right. But potentially it is. Maybe, we're now getting the stuff so quickly from the breweries, but the beers they used to do, but they used to then send out in small pack, you might then get a couple of weeks later via your normal online retailer, or, for example, when you order something from Beer Central. So when it comes out, but you don't have it for another 3 or 4 weeks, maybe longer, by the time you've built up your box. And you probably haven't had a beer which you would describe as having any form of can shop when you've done it from Beer Central. So maybe there is an element of truth in there that you can sometimes have certain beers too quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this is very well rounded now.
Yes,
it's very balanced.
It's definitely got that sort of cask quality to it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really enjoyable. It's becoming a bit of a catchphrase, this, but I don't think it's going to last too long in the glass.
But we're not the only ones who have this problem.
No, beer evaporation is a very real problem that we seem to suffer from these days. It really is. Now, we were sent this by Stu and the team at Yeastie Boys, this and a few other beers to try as well, from kind of a bit of a relaunched range that they've got now, and to coincide with the release of a triple IPA as well, which we're going to be trying shortly. But Yeastie Boys are now brewing all of their stuff at Utopian, aren't they? And they've developed a new yeast strain as well that they're using in all of their beers, which they've called Cosmic Yeast in true Yeastie Boys manner. But it's a strain of Kvike yeast that they've basically developed and they now use in all of their beers. So this ESB has been brewed using the new Cosmic Yeast that they have.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting route to go. I had the digital IPA and the pot kettle black that they sent over as well, and both of them were tasting banging. Whatever this Cosmic Yeast is doing, plus their partnership with Utopian, I'm not sure Yeastie Boys beers have tasted better in my mind.
I would agree. I think they are reaching an absolute peak in terms of what their beers are tasting like and how they're presenting them as well. The yeast strain is working really well in their beers.
Definitely. And can I just a shout out personally to Stu for the beers that he did send us. He sent us both a personalised note.
Yeah,
with the beers as well.
Such a lovely touch. Yeah,
which was a really nice thing to say. One was about the discussion that we had with Combi, and on my side, one was about Alisson scoring that last-minute goal for Liverpool with an awesome header. Stu's a bit of a Liverpool fan as well, so that really did mean a lot. I really appreciated it, and obviously massive thanks to the beers. But I think this is a wonderful partnership, Yeastie Boys and Utopian. And this beer, they've taken the ethos of Utopian by using all British ingredients, effectively, but Utopian haven't got an ale.
No. So this is kind of sits partly in their range as well. It's got a foot in each camp, hasn't it?
Yeah, and like I said, I think this is tasting great, but I think a good way of testing that is sometimes go back to those core beers. Although digital IPA is an annual release beer now, isn't it?
Yeah, I didn't realise that had happened. But in some of the notes that Stu sent over, he said that digital IPA is now only a once a year beer, and that's quite interesting because that was a core beer, wasn't it?
And like I said, still tasting fantastic as well. So I am rather surprised about that. Maybe it's brewed once a year, but for 11 months, who knows?
Yeah. I shall look forward to trying those myself. Before this beer does actually evaporate from the glass, we should probably get on to this week's question.
Opinions, 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 opinions.
So this was, again, continuing on a theme about micropubs. And we asked, what is it that defines a micropub for you? So we had 400 votes, 73.5% of people going for the size or the capacity of the place, 18.5% going for the beer range, 2.5% going for location, and 5.5% going for other. Which may get picked up in some of the comments that we're going to go through. Now, we have done a poll on micropubs before, which was back in September 2019, and that was simply asking whether people loved or hated them. Overwhelmingly, 90.3% of people back then actually loved the concept of a micropub, and I think what we've seen happen in the sort of 18 months, almost 2 years since that poll, is we are seeing more micropubs appearing. As I say, I visited a new one in Colchester at the weekend. There are a couple of others in Essex. I know you've got a couple near you as well, and we are seeing more and more of them, aren't we? Well, let's go through some of the comments this week, and then we'll share our views on this one.
So for Mark Johnson, I went for location and I'm surprised to see it have so few votes, although I suppose it ties in with size. A micropub to me is a small pub bar environment set up in a non-pub setting, i.e. in a high street shop rather than one of the premises of a traditional licensed public house. From Kerry Jones at Saisons, if a micropub was defined as not a micropub because they don't have only cask, then one of the oldest micropubs in the north of Wales, Moulder Ale House, wouldn't class as one, and it most certainly is a micropub. It's a fantastic little venue, and Gareth does an excellent job supporting so many independent small breweries, local and not so local, and it's one of my favourite places to go buy beer, either to take away or when we can drink in.
From Can I Get a P? Can I Get a P? Yep, there's elements I don't agree with, like no lager and no spirits. Smacks of being a club for a specific kind of person. I could understand not doing shots, but not doing a G&T or any of the great lagers that have spouted here is a dumb move. And then from James at James Moosh, it does need to be small, but can't just be any small pub. It also must be independent and have a micropub attitude, which is tricky to define, but I think we all know it when we see it.
And from the Grumpy Brewer at the Brewery Lad, a micropub should not just be a small bar. I agree with the main ideals of the Micropub Association, but it should have a limited drink trade based around a selection of real ales, and the layout should promote conversation amongst the punters, overseen by a great governor. Aid at Ada Rose 88. For me, it's about a no-frills experience. Beer, seats, toilets. That's about it.
From Mappy Man at Mappy Man 1. If you're visiting a new town and you have a feeling of slight discomfort on first entering because you know it's going to be like an urban slaughtered lamb but with less chairs, then it's a micro. If not, it's a pub. And then from Stephen O'Kane at Socrates 9. I've only been in a couple of micropubs when over in Britain on holiday. Here in Northern Ireland, it's practically impossible for someone to open one due to awfully antiquated alcohol licensing laws that hold back pubs from flourishing in many different ways.
From Mike Maguire at Maguire Mike. I'd like to see more micropubs set up out of town. Pubs and shops are no longer the centre of housing estates they once were. From Matt Curtis at Total Curtis. For me, it's a pub in a former shop, but it still feels like a shop and not a pub.
From Neil Palmer, at Neil Palmer 5. For me, it's all about strangers coming together and becoming friends, even if that's just for the amount of time they visit, which is why being small is key, i.e. you've got no choice but to sit close and most likely strike up conversations. And then finally from Bexley Brewery, at Bexley Brewery, as well as our own micropub, we deliver to many more across South East London and Kent. They're all unique with their own style, character and quirkiness, and they also serve a range of beers, ciders, wines and spirits. The only thing that should define a micro is its size. So quite a range of differing views there on what makes a micropub or what defines a micropub. Now, there is, as somebody mentioned, a micropub association, isn't there? And I know that you've...
The Micropub and a Microbrewery Association now as well.
Okay. We'll put a link in the show notes so people can have a look through on that. But there is they have an actual definition of what a micropub should be, don't they?
Yes. So, according to their homepage, a micropub is a small free house which listens to its customers, mainly serves cask ales, promotes conversation, shuns all forms of electronic entertainment, and dabbles in traditional pub snacks. And that's it. That is their definition of a micropub as per their association.
That's interesting. Do you think?
Well, camera were able to define what real ale is, and maybe the Micropub and Microbrewery Association have watched the world tie itself up in knots about how to define craft ale and decided they should come up with something. Plenty of the micropubs I have been to do tend to be small. Cask ale is obviously the predominant beer available. The shuns all forms of electronic entertainment, including mobile phones, and you have some of those idiotic statements up like phone will be taken off you or you'll be like a swear box kind of fine. And the most recent visit I did to a micropub, they did only have traditional pub snacks. So effectively crisps, nuts and pork scratchings, if we're defining that as traditional. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's a million miles away from what people expect there to be as a micropub. Well, I mean, what was taking that as a definition, Steve, before we get into our own thoughts, how would you apply that to your most recent visit, which was only very recently to the Magnet?
Now, it's quite interesting, actually, because personally, I felt that the Magnet was a bit too big to be a micropub. The ones I've been in before have been a lot smaller. And I think going with what Matt Curtis said for about it being a pub that's in a shop, and it still feels like a shop and not a pub. That's very much been my experience in the past. Now, the Magnet has obviously opened up inside of what used to be a pub, albeit they've redesigned it, and it's quite interesting because even while we're in there, because Em and I were out with some friends, and our friends not necessarily as beery as you and I, actually said while we're in there, well, what makes it a micropub? Why is this a micropub? Why isn't it just a pub? Why isn't it a bar? And I think that's the key thing, is that when your average punter can't actually distinguish between it just being a normal pub or something smaller, then is it actually a micropub, or are they just using that as a label to set them aside from the crowd, sort of thing?
I haven't been to the Magnet, but I had been to the Norfolk previously. Not necessarily out of choice; it's where other people may have wanted to go, and they showed the football as well. By far and away, one of my least favourite pubs ever in Colchester, so I'm glad it's been put to better use.
Just say exactly what you mean, mate.
Oh, mate, my last experience in there was me and one other person watching Colchester United in the playoffs, and they said I couldn't have my beer in a glass because it was a football day. Really? There's two of us in here. By the start of the second half, there was none of us in there. Fuckers. But anyway, you brought back bad memories there. No, I think on this occasion, although I haven't been in there, I think perhaps they are using the term micropub to their advantage.
I think they are.
Colchester hasn't got a micropub. People visiting the town may well say, oh, where can I go for a drink? Oh, look, there's a micropub. Less than 5 minutes walk from the station before you even get into town. Or if you're a visiting fan for the football, there's a micropub, and I can still get the bus up to the stadium from there as well. So I think they're maybe being a bit cute, and that's not to say there's anything wrong with the actual pub, because I haven't been in there, but I think maybe they're being a bit fast and loose with using the terminology, because they've got the hand pumps. You said they've got a range of other drinks and keg line as well.
Well, 5 keg lines. This was a font with 5 keg taps on it. So there's clearly
like
there's a cellar somewhere, and yeah, to me, I've got to say, and don't get me wrong, it's a lovely place, and there was a lovely environment and atmosphere in there yesterday afternoon, and by the sounds of it, this was their opening weekend, and they've been very well supported by the local community, but it's a pub. It's a small pub. It's not a micropub. It's got none of the quirkiness that I've experienced in other micropubs.
Yeah, and that is something which I think I've experienced in the past. I'm a bit in two minds about it. I mean, I suppose from their point of view, they're better positioned to open now, being a bigger micro pub in inverted commas than some micro pubs would be to, who would definitely struggle to fit X amount of people into the social distancing space we have now. Going back to one of the comments that someone made about bit small, you're sitting close to people, conversation then comes up. In a social distancing environment, that happens less unless you're already in your group of 6. And I can picture some micropubs I've been to, Hot Beer Shop. Once you've got 6 people around the table, there isn't going to be much room for other people to be there and be distanced as well. So that would be a struggle. So perhaps the magnet has been a bit cute there as well. I think some micropubs can be a bit cliquey.
Yeah, I've experienced that in a couple that I've been in as well.
Not a million miles away from that, the old saloon door opening and everything going silent. And partly that's just because there's a group of people who really like what's going on in there, but because it's smaller, there isn't anywhere to hide from it either. Mm. So that plays against it. I definitely think they have a place. I like the idea that you can convert an unused shop, and let's face it, we all know high streets with unused shops these days, don't we?
Yeah.
So if it can be put to a good use and people enjoy it and people like going to them, then it is another option, and I applaud that. The definition that they've come up with, I quite like, but I know there's people who I spend time with who wouldn't have any interest in going to what we class as a micropub. That phrase, which someone said, may not be able to define it, but we can recognise it. Some people I know just wouldn't be interested in being a micropub for any length of time.
Yeah, I agree with that. But what is the thing that makes a micropub for you? So if we go back to the actual question, what do you think is the defining characteristic of a micropub?
The obvious thing is the size. So it is a small area. It is an area that has been repurposed from something completely different previously. Not so much location. I mean, I know what Mark is saying about it being on the high street, but it is the fact that you go in there and it looks busy, but it's busy because it's got about 7 people in there. And then it's all about cask. And a lot of them will do the thing about having all the cask bits on the wall and stuff like that. So it's sized and beer. You're expecting to get cask when you go into a micropub straight away, aren't you?
Yeah, I think you're looking for it as well. And you're probably looking for local cask.
Yeah.
As well. You're hoping they've got local cask. Yeah, on the whole, I'd agree with what you're saying there. For me, it's a size thing, and it's then what are the beers that you're offering, and is it local? Because that's essentially what you're looking for, isn't it?
Yeah, and that would be my deal. If I went in and found that actually they didn't have much on local, and the cask choices were really limited, I would question if it's a micropub.
It would seem that you and I have very similar views on what we believe a micropub to be. Loads of great views from our listeners this week as well. And as always, that's just a snapshot of some of those comments. There will be a link in the show notes to the question. You can click on that. You can look at all the responses. And you can keep your views on this one coming in. Use the hashtag Hopinions. And you may very well find yourself in this next part of the show.
Let us know, write it down. Let us know, write it down. Let us know your thoughts and bitter and lingerness. Write it down.
First up from Hugh at H Yardley 33. Great show. I'm on holiday in England early July and driving between Southampton and York. I now have my halfway stop destination on that journey. The wife can drive the second leg. Also a gallon of 10% Russian Imperial Stout right off your next day. And then from Paul at Ewan RCD, excellent episode, everyone. Loved the passion. Beers sounded awesome, as did the Pork Pie Festival. Currently checking the dates for 2022.
From Malt Travail at Malt_Ale, fantastic listen. Pie Fest definitely in the diary for August, and lashings of round corner hopping spree. From Rich Taylor, great episode. I've never wanted a pork pie, some Stilton cheese, and an Impy Stout as much as I did today. Also, thanks for putting on a great summer sesh and looking forward to meeting people for actual real-life beer soon. And from Mappy Man, brilliant stuff, love the passion. Well, fancy that. Pie Fest 2021 is on my birthday weekend. Mrs. M has fallen off the sofa when I told her how we are celebrating.
From Beers Without Frontiers podcast at Beers_Frontiers. Great show again, guys. Combi's infectious enthusiasm made for great listening. Hoping to see some round corner make it over to the pubs of Warwickshire. And then from James at Gammon Baron, great episode. Combi is a great evangelist, not just for round corner, but for good beer, tap rooms and garden centres. Their tap room is 25 miles from my in-laws, so I'm going to have to bite the bullet and visit them so I can get to the tap and get some pies too. Sounds like a lot of people are going to be descending on Melton Mowbray, doesn't it? I might have got in just at the right time before everybody else makes it there.
I mean, it's looking that way, but I'm really glad that people appreciated and got the passion that came across from Combi, because that's certainly how we felt, and it's definitely how you felt, Steve, judging by your prompt booking and arranging of the birthday weekend for Emma. She's a lucky girl getting a treat around corner and all
Isn't
that cheese.
she just? Isn't she?
But no, I'm really pleased because we felt it on the night. Well, you know, that Monday night recording was straight after the weekend of Summer Sesh. And I wouldn't say we were jaded, but we're definitely feeling a little bit tired. Combi's enthusiasm and passion for all things Melton Mowbray, round corner, good beer, and where it is, really lifted us with his energy and stuff. So I'm glad it came across.
Yeah, I'd agree. Actually, it was a struggle to think about recording that night, but the minute Combi joined us on Zoom, yeah, the enthusiasm, the energy was there, and it just enabled us to kind of ride along that on that wave with him a little bit, and he dragged us along, and it was a great show. And yeah, I mean, I can speak very much from a personal point of view now. It's well worth the trip. Because it's a lovely little space, and you are going to drink some fantastic beers while you're there as well. Final thoughts on the Otherworld Extra Special Bitter, and apparently you have to call it an extra special bitter. You can't actually call it an ESB, can you? Because it's that particular phrase that's trademarked by Fuller's.
Yes, which I think we only found out on that, or I certainly only found out when we had that was part of the launch of Utopian.
No, it was on the Neptune birthday party.
Oh, well, yeah, of course, because they had brought an extra special bitter out.
Yeah, and there was a conversation how their first batch of that was called ESB, and then Mr. Keeling politely pointed out to them that they weren't allowed to do that.
Brilliant. I didn't know you could actually have a style like that, but I suppose Green King have been trying to do that with IPA for years, haven't they?
Yeah.
Brand it. I would really, really like to have that beer on cask that we just had, the Otherworld. I think the qualities of it, the earthiness, the malty backbone, that little bit of orange marmalade that you referenced, would all sing on cask. I also think on cask through a hand pull, I think you'd also the life. I mean, I wouldn't say there's a lack of life in the beer I had, but I think in cask it would just raise it to another level as well. and it would really, really sing.
Yeah, I think it'd work well to soften some of the notes and just bring a tad more balance to. I mean, it is really, really balanced anyway. Don't get me wrong. But you put that on cask, and that becomes a different beer almost.
I mean, it becomes a really dangerous beer, 5.4%. So I reckon you would really be able to session those as well on cask.
Yes, yeah. And that's a lovely segue. Talking of dangerous beers, we're now going to move on to Yeastie Boys' latest release, which is Englebert Pumpernickel. It's a triple IPA, which comes in at 9.2%. They have released this to coincide with pubs and bars and venues opening again. It's the second time this beer has been released. It was previously a collaboration between Yeastie Boys, Firestone Walker, and I want to say the other one is Panhead.
That is looking class in a glass, mate.
It looks thick, doesn't it?
It does look thick. I mean, for a triple IPA, considering some of the triple IPAs that you and I have actually sampled this year, it's actually a reasonable number at 9.2%.
Yes, well, reasonable.
Yeah. I did say in comparison to,
and it's what we choose to finish this week's show with. But let's get into this because I've just had a little nose on it, and that is resinous.
Yeah.
Oh,
cheers. Cool. It's really got that orange again, hasn't it?
It's got a real pithiness to it, hasn't it?
Oh. There's quite a high residue of sweetness on my lips afterwards, but not coating my mouth or anything like that. It's not got any sort of dankness about it at all. I would say it's got a bit of a hop haze in the glass. Would you say?
Yeah. I mean, it is kind of maybe bordering a little bit on what you'd call murky, maybe.
I'm going to go with the hop haze, but fantastic carbonation. 2-finger head in the glass on it, nice and white foamy. That is really tasty. That is actually a good beer to finish an evening's recording on, mate.
Where does the bitterness hit for you on that?
For me, it sort of comes halfway through. I'm not getting it at the end. At the end, it is more the fruit and I'm still getting all the aroma and stuff, but the actual bitterness, there's a bit of dryness maybe there, but the actual bitterness sort of comes halfway through for me.
Yeah, that's what I found. That on that first sip that I took, it kind of hit as I was taking the second and third sip of it, and then it kind of dissipated a little bit by the time it got through to the finish, and what you got was the pithy, dry sweetness on the end. That's really clever, actually, that bitterness hits in the middle rather than on the finish.
Although what I would say is it makes you want to go back in even quicker.
Yeah.
With the bitterness, because a lot of time for me it's the bitterness that then draws me back. And I do wonder whether this cosmic yeast that they're now using and stuff, which is some sort of derivative of the Kvike yeast, whether that's also adding to this flavour which we're getting,
possibly,
especially with the orange notes. But it's really well balanced. I said 9.2% dangerous beer, but very sensibly in a 330 can.
Yes, yeah, which goes back to what we were talking about on the last show with Combi, the big beers in small cans, please. I want to see more of this.
Yeah, I don't know why people would think otherwise, no matter how much you enjoy it. That is really good. I mean, I said it earlier, I think Yeastie Boys are smashing it at the moment, and I think their partnership with Utopian, I hope this carries on going for a long while yet.
I honestly believe it's taken them to another level in terms of their beer.
I couldn't agree more. And, there seems to be a real mutual respect between them as well, between Yeastie Boys and Utopian. And it can only help each other because eventually people will start realising that there's a connection between the two. You then might think, oh, well, if I like Yeastie Boys, I'll seek out Utopian or vice versa. I think this is a wonderful partnership that I think can pay real big dividends.
Yeah, I agree. And very excited to see what's going to be coming from them in the future, because they, I mean, certainly those beers that they sent over to us, there were some new ones that I've not seen before from
same here.
the Yeastie Boys. There's a black IPA in there, and there's a Belgian beer in there as well.
Yeah,
so,
Belgian Golden Ale, isn't there?
Yeah, I'm very excited to try those. I really am. Plus, as you say, you know, if you've gone back into the digital IPA and the pot kettle black, it's been a while since I've had those beers, so I'm looking forward to giving them a go again.
Yeah, like I said, I would be massively surprised if you don't have a similar sort of outlook as I did after you had them.
Yeah. Well, we are very, very grateful to Stu and the team at Yeastie Boys for getting in touch and for sending across a few beers for us to try. We certainly have thoroughly enjoyed these two that we're drinking on this evening's show. We're also very grateful to the folks at the Greater Good Brewing Co for sending us the Pinter kits to try, and for giving Martin and I our first experience of making beer at home, to varying degrees of success, it would seem. Well, I think we mentioned it a couple of times tonight in terms of what we've got coming up on the next show, mate. But do you want to just remind our listeners what's happening?
Yeah, no problem, Steve. So we've got Robert at 6 Degrees North. Now, obviously, we referenced the news earlier about the downsizing and the repositioning of the company and what they want to do. So we're going to try some of the beers. They're going to be, I think some of the beers we're going to receive are going to be in the 330 or 440 cans that they're now producing. And I think it'd be a really interesting discussion to listen to how they're going to bring it back to being local while still being influenced by the international beer styles they're renowned for. So very much looking forward to that discussion with Robert.
Yeah, and it seems interesting times to them as well, because at the same time that they've done this downsizing, they've also launched all of their beers into cans as well. So, yeah, looking forward to that, and certainly looking forward to trying some of their beers. I think for you and I right now, mate, we're probably just going to go away and enjoy this triple IPA for the rest of the evening. And I think that's how we'll leave our listeners, with that image in their head of you and I slowly sipping this wonderful beer. So thanks for listening. Cheers.
Cheers.